For much of the offseason, the Pittsburgh Steelers have existed in a state of quarterback limbo. Every major decision, from coaching adjustments to roster construction, has felt tethered to one central question. What is Aaron Rodgers going to do? Now, for the first time in weeks, there's legitimate momentum pointing toward clarity and toward continuity. According to NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero, the odds are increasing that Rodgers returns for the 2026 season, and more importantly, that if he does play, it will be in Pittsburgh. Pelissero's assessment carries weight because it cuts against the earlier uncertainty that clouded the situation. This wasn't framed as speculation. It was framed as trajectory. The odds are rising, he said. I don't see it being any place else. That statement changes the temperature around the franchise. Just weeks ago, reports suggested Rodgers was leaning closer to retirement than a return. Aditi Kinkhabwala of CBS Sports had indicated that the veteran quarterback might be trending away from another year in black and gold. That fueled anxiety within the fan base and inside the organization. Because without Rodgers, Pittsburgh's entire timeline accelerates into uncertainty. With Rodgers, however, the Steelers remain competitive immediately. This isn't just about nostalgia or name value. It's about stability during transition. The franchise is navigating a coaching shift, moving from the long-standing era of Mike Tomlin to a new chapter under Mike McCarthy. That type of transition can destabilize even strong locker rooms. Philosophies change, practice structures shift, terminology evolves. In those moments, a veteran quarterback becomes more than a passer. He becomes an anchor. Rodgers' presence would ease that transition in ways that go beyond statistics. Even at this stage of his career, Rodgers remains one of the most cerebral quarterbacks in NFL history. His understanding of defensive structures, leverage, timing, and situational football gives him an almost coordinator-level grasp of the game. When a new coaching regime steps in, having that kind of on-field extension of the staff is invaluable. It also buys time. Pittsburgh drafted Will Howard in the 6th round in 2025. He's talented, but he's raw. Late-round quarterbacks are developmental projects more often than immediate starters. If Rodgers returns for 2026, Howard gains another year to observe preparation habits, film study routines, and weekly adjustments from one of the most accomplished signal callers of this era. That apprenticeship matters. Quarterback development isn't linear. The speed of the NFL game overwhelms many young passers early. Learning behind Rodgers, watching how he manipulates safeties, controls protections, and dictates tempo could be the difference between Howard becoming a long-term asset or just another late-round flyer. From a competitive standpoint, Rodgers' return keeps the Steelers firmly in the AFC playoff conversation. Pittsburgh's roster isn't barren. The defense remains structurally sound. The organization has long prioritized trench play and physicality, but modern AFC football demands high-level quarterback performance to survive January. The conference is stacked with elite passers. Falling behind at that position almost guarantees irrelevance. Rodgers gives them a fighting chance, and the language used by Pelissero is key. He didn't suggest Rodgers might explore other teams. He didn't frame this as an open market situation. He implied exclusivity, that if Rodgers plays, it's for Pittsburgh. That's significant because it suggests comfort. Comfort with the system, comfort with the organization, comfort with the locker room. Rodgers has been in the league long enough to recognize environments that fit and those that don't. If retirement was the primary alternative and yet the odds are rising toward a return, that implies something about how he views his experience in Pittsburgh. It also suggests unfinished business. The Steelers' recent postseason struggles have weighed heavily on the franchise. They've been competitive but not dominant. A deep playoff run would redefine Rodgers' brief tenure in Pittsburgh. Instead of a transitional veteran stop, it becomes a meaningful late career chapter. There's also the financial layer. Quarterbacks of Rodgers' stature don't come cheaply, but Pittsburgh's front office appears willing to structure deals creatively to maintain flexibility. If both sides want a reunion, cap mechanics rarely become insurmountable obstacles. Short-term incentives, bonuses tied to games played, and playoff escalators can align motivations. The broader impact of Rodgers' return would ripple beyond the quarterback room. Free agents pay attention to stability. Receivers want proven passers. Offensive linemen prefer experienced pocket managers. If Rodgers commits early in the offseason, Pittsburgh becomes a more attractive destination for complementary pieces. And timing matters. The Steelers reportedly prefer clarity before the new league year begins. That's strategic. Knowing whether Rodgers returns shapes draft strategy, free agency aggression, and internal extension talks. Waiting too long compresses decision-making windows. Pelissero's update, therefore, isn't just good news, it's actionable news. It allows Pittsburgh to begin mapping scenarios with increasing confidence. It allows McCarthy to build his offensive framework around a specific skill set. Rodgers isn't a plug-and-play quarterback at this stage. He thrives in systems tailored to his autonomy and pre-snap freedom. Another subtle but important factor is leadership continuity. The locker room respects production. Rodgers' resume commands attention instantly. Younger players fall in line when preparation standards are visible daily. That cultural reinforcement is invaluable during a coaching shift. Skeptics will point to age. Rodgers is deep into his career. Durability questions inevitably surface. But late career quarterbacks have extended their windows in recent years through conditioning, scheme adaptability, and experience. The Steelers don't need Rodgers to be 2011 MVP level explosive. They need efficiency, late decision-making, and situational mastery. They need calm. A 2026 return also reshapes public perception. Weeks ago, the narrative centered on retirement whispers and uncertainty. Now, the conversation pivots to momentum and probability. That psychological shift matters in a media-driven league. Of course, nothing is official. Rodgers ultimately controls the decision. That autonomy has defined his career. But momentum often reveals intention. And right now, the momentum is leaning toward one more run in black and gold. If that materializes, Pittsburgh avoids the chaos of a full quarterback reset. They avoid forcing Howard into action prematurely. They avoid overpaying in a volatile free agent market. Instead, they buy time. They preserve competitiveness. They maintain relevance in a brutal conference. And perhaps most importantly, they maintain identity. The Steelers have long valued veteran leadership and continuity. Rodgers returning aligns with that philosophy. It signals that the organization believes its window isn't closed, merely recalibrated. There's still work to do. Offensive consistency must improve. Protection schemes must adapt. The running game must support the passing attack. But those are refinements. Without Rodgers, the conversation would shift to reinvention. Pelissero's report suggests refinement, not reinvention. For a franchise in transition, that distinction is enormous. If Rodgers steps back onto the field in 2026 wearing black and gold, it won't just be another season. It will represent strategic patience, mutual belief, and a shared understanding that the story isn't finished. And in a league defined by rapid turnover and constant volatility, even the hint of continuity can feel like a competitive advantage. Ball security is one of the least glamorous aspects of football, but inside NFL buildings, it's treated like sacred doctrine. Coaches will tolerate a missed cut. They'll live with a blown protection if it comes from inexperience. But nothing empties a sideline faster than a fumble. Nothing flips momentum more violently. And nothing tests trust between player and staff quite like putting the ball on the ground. That's what makes what Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet have accomplished in Seattle almost absurd. During the Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl winning 2026 campaign, their rushing attack evolved from inconsistent to dominant. But the deeper story isn't just production. It's security. It's discipline. It's a statistical anomaly that demands context. Combined, Walker and Charbonnet have logged 1,333 carries with just one total fumble between them. Read that again. In an era where defenders are trained to punch, rake, twist, and attack the football on every tackle, two primary running backs sharing that volume with only one fumble is nearly unheard of. To grasp how outrageous that is, consider recent league benchmarks. Earlier this decade, the record for most career touches without a fumble was broken multiple times. Tyler Allgeier set a new mark at 737 touches, surpassing the 724 previously recorded by Philip Lindsay, and those were individual achievements, rare outliers that required near-perfect technique and a little fortune. Now compare that to Seattle's tandem. If Walker and Charbonnet have combined for 1,333 carries with a single fumble, that averages out to roughly 667 carries per back for every one ball put on the ground. That's not just good, that's structural excellence. And the context matters. These aren't gadget backs with limited roles. They're foundational pieces in a physical offense. They run between the tackles. They absorb contact at the second level. They close games in 4-minute situations where defenses know exactly what's coming. Late in the season, especially during a championship run, fatigue sets in, defenders become more aggressive, and every carry becomes contested. Yet the ball stays secured. From a coaching standpoint, that speaks volumes. Natural vision and explosiveness are gifts. You can refine footwork, you can scheme advantageous looks. But instincts, the feel for space, the timing of cuts, are often innate. Ball security, however, is drilled relentlessly, high and tight. 5 points of pressure, offhand over the tip in traffic, 2 hands through congestion. These are not slogans, they're habits carved through repetition. Practice periods devoted entirely to defenders trying to rip the ball free. Film sessions critiquing hand placement on every run, not just the explosive ones. Walker and Charbonnet executing at this level suggests not only individual discipline, but a cohesive culture within the running back room. There's also a psychological dimension to this stat. Running backs operate in chaos. They make decisions in fractions of seconds, while 300-pound linemen collapse lanes and linebackers scrape downhill with violence. Maintaining ball security in that environment requires split-second awareness. You must anticipate contact before it arrives. You must switch hands strategically depending on pursuit angles. You must sacrifice extra yardage at times to protect possession. The great backs understand situational value. 3rd and short near midfield in the second quarter is not the same as protecting a 4-point lead with 3 minutes left in the Super Bowl. Championship-level backs process that difference instinctively. Seattle's late-season surge in 2026 highlighted that maturity. When games tightened, the offense didn't become reckless. It became methodical. The ground game shifted from explosive to punishing. Drives extended. Clocks drained. Opponents grew frustrated. And through it all, the ball never hit the turf. That reliability builds trust. Quarterbacks trust it. Offensive coordinators trust it. Head coaches lean into it. When you know your backs won't compromise possession, play calling expands. You can call inside zone into loaded boxes. You can lean on duo concepts against heavy fronts. You can stay patient. Defenses, meanwhile, grow desperate. In today's NFL, turnovers are often the equalizer. Underdogs rely on strip sacks and forced fumbles to tilt games. When a backfield field eliminates that variable, it removes a lifeline for opponents. It's also worth noting that shared workloads typically increase risk. 2 backs rotating means rhythm can fluctuate. Each must stay mentally sharp despite alternating series. Some runners struggle to find feel without volume. Yet Walker and Charbonnet have maintained elite security despite splitting opportunities. That speaks to preparation. Each snap matters. Each carry is approached with the same discipline, whether it's the first of the game or the 15th. Physically, both backs bring different traits. Walker is explosive, capable of turning a subtle crease into a 40-yard sprint. Charbonnet brings size and contact balance, often absorbing first hits without losing forward momentum. Their styles complement each other, lightning and leverage, but both prioritize ball integrity. And that consistency is what makes the statistics so staggering. The NFL is littered with talented runners whose careers were derailed by fumble issues. A single high-profile turnover in a playoff game can alter legacies. Coaches remember. Front offices remember. Ball security isn't optional. It's existential. For Seattle, it's become a weapon. In their Super Bowl winning stretch, controlling tempo was critical. Sustained drives wear down pass rushers. They shorten games. They keep opposing quarterbacks on the sideline. But that strategy collapses instantly if possession flips. Walker and Charbonnet eliminated that vulnerability. There's also a broader reflection on organizational philosophy. Great rushing attacks aren't just about blocking schemes. They're about culture, a commitment to detail, an understanding that the mundane fundamentals often separate contenders from pretenders. The Seahawks coaching staff deserves credit here. Ball security isn't glamorous. It doesn't dominate highlight reels, but it wins in January. And let's put the 1,333 carry figure into perspective again. Most individual backs never approach that volume without multiple fumbles scattered across seasons. Even elite runners typically average one fumble every few hundred touches. Variance alone almost guarantees it. To have two backs sharing that workload and collectively committing just one is statistical defiance. It also changes defensive behavior. When defenders realize strips aren't coming, they adjust. They focus more on gang tackling. They wrap instead of punch. That slight hesitation in turnover pursuit can open marginal yardage gains. The extra 2 yards that convert 3rd and 2, the extra 4 that flip field position. Championship runs are built on margins. Seattle's transformation from inconsistent early in the year to heroic late wasn't magic. It was layered improvement, protection adjustments, red zone efficiency, defensive resilience, and underneath it all, unwavering ball security. Running backs often receive praise for yards per carry or total touchdowns. Those numbers are visible. They're marketable. But possession integrity might be the most underrated metric in the sport. Walker and Charbonnet have elevated it to an art form. And as long as that discipline continues, the Seahawks' ground game won't just be explosive. It will be trusted. In a league where chaos reigns and games swing on a single bounce, having two primary backs who almost never let that bounce happen is more than impressive. It's championship DNA. The Dallas Cowboys didn't reach the postseason in 2025, but one thing became undeniably clear over the course of the year. They found a difference maker on the outside. Dallas Cowboys wide receiver George Pickens delivered the most complete season of his career, erupting for 93 receptions, 1,029 yards, and 9 touchdowns. In a year that ended with a 7-9-1 record and another playoff absence, Pickens was not the problem. In many ways, he was the proof that the offensive blueprint still works when properly executed. Now, as free agency approaches, Dallas has made its stance unmistakably clear. Pickens is not walking out the door. According to Judy Batista of NFL.com, Executive Vice President Stephen Jones confirmed the Cowboys plan to use the franchise tag on Pickens in the coming days. Jones reinforced that position in comments to John Machota of The Athletic, stating plainly, "We want Pickens here. We think the world of him. We love him. And I think he wants to be here." That's not cautious corporate language. That's commitment. The franchise tag is one of the NFL's most powerful roster tools. It guarantees a player a 1-year salary calculated at the top end of his position while preventing him from negotiating freely with other teams. For a wide receiver of Pickens' caliber, that tag number will be substantial, but so would the open market bidding, and that's the key. Pickens just posted 1,429 receiving yards. That's not complimentary production, that's number one receiver output. In fact, in many markets, those numbers would define a team's top pass catcher. In Dallas, however, Pickens functions alongside CeeDee Lamb, forming one of the most dangerous 1-2 combinations in the league. Stylistically, they complement each other perfectly. Lamb thrives with route precision, versatility, and inside-out alignment flexibility. Pickens brings vertical explosiveness, body control, and contested catch dominance along the boundary. Together, they stress defenses horizontally and vertically. Safeties can't shade help permanently to one side without exposing the other. Corners can't consistently press without risking explosive plays. And at the center of it all is Dak Prescott. Prescott and Pickens developed immediate chemistry in their first season together. Timing routes hit in stride. Back shoulder throws looked rehearsed. Third down conversions came in critical moments. Even though Dallas fell short collectively, the quarterback-receiver synergy was undeniable. Letting that walk after one season would have been organizational malpractice. But the franchise tag signals something more nuanced than just retention. It suggests the Cowboys want flexibility. Tagging Pickens gives Dallas time. It prevents him from entering a volatile receiver market while allowing both sides to negotiate a long-term extension without the pressure of a looming departure. If talks stall, the Cowboys still retain his rights for 2026. If they find common ground, the tag becomes a bridge to a multi-year commitment. Financially, this decision is significant. Wide receiver contract tags have escalated dramatically in recent seasons. Elite wideouts now command north of $25 million annually. Pickens, coming off a breakout year and entering his prime, would likely command a deal in that range on the open market. Tagging him delays that long-term cap hit, even if it doesn't eliminate it. From a roster building perspective, this move signals that Dallas believes its window remains open. 2 consecutive playoff misses could have triggered a soft reset. Instead, the Cowboys are doubling down on offensive firepower. Prescott is still in place, Lamb is under contract, Pickens is being secured. That's not the blueprint of a rebuilding team. It's the blueprint of one that believes its struggles were situational rather than structural. Of course, production must translate to wins. The 7-9-1 finish underscores that star power alone isn't enough. Defensive consistency, red zone efficiency, and situational discipline must improve. But removing Pickens from the equation would have made those fixes harder, not easier. There's also the intangible factor. Pickens' edge, his competitive swagger, injects energy into the offense. He plays with visible confidence, bordering on defiance. That personality can be polarizing, but in Dallas, it appears to have found the right balance. Stephen Jones' comments reflect more than appreciation for numbers. They reflect belief in fit, and fit matters in Dallas. The Cowboys are one of the NFL's most scrutinized franchises. Pressure is constant. Every snap is magnified. Not every player thrives in that spotlight. Pickens did. Now the question becomes long-term alignment. Will the two sides finalize an extension before the season, or will Pickens play 2026 under the tag, betting on himself again? The franchise tag often creates leverage standoffs, but it can also accelerate compromise if both sides share the same goal. Jones' public endorsement suggests that common ground is likely. Strategically, retaining Pickens also keeps Dallas competitive in an NFC landscape that remains fluid. Elite receiver duos are rare. Defenses increasingly rely on hybrid coverages and disguised pressures. Having 2 legitimate perimeter threats simplifies offensive play calling and stresses defensive depth. And perhaps most importantly, continuity breeds efficiency. Prescott doesn't need a learning curve with Pickens. The offensive staff doesn't need to redesign route trees. Timing and trust already exist. In a league where marginal gains often separate playoff teams from also-rans, that stability matters. The Cowboys have missed the postseason 2 straight years. Patience among the fan base is thinning. But rather than tearing down, the organization appears committed to refining. Tagging George Pickens is a statement. It says Dallas recognizes elite production when it sees it. It says they value chemistry. It says they're willing to allocate premium resources to maintain offensive potency. Whether that translates into playoff football in 2026 remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the Cowboys aren't letting one of the league's most explosive receivers test the open market without a fight. And for a team determined to reverse its trajectory, that's a decisive place to start. The Dallas Cowboys didn't reach the postseason in 2025, but one thing became undeniably clear over the course of the year. They found a difference maker on the outside. Dallas Cowboys wide receiver George Pickens delivered the most complete season of his career, erupting for 93 receptions, 1,029 yards, and 9 touchdowns. In a year that ended with a 7-9-1 record and another playoff absence, Pickens was not the problem. In many ways, he was the proof that the offensive blueprint still works when properly executed. Now, as free agency approaches, Dallas has made its stance unmistakably clear. Pickens is not walking out the door. According to Judy Batista of NFL.com, Executive Vice President Stephen Jones confirmed the Cowboys plan to use the franchise tag on Pickens in the coming days. Jones reinforced that position in comments to John Machota of The Athletic, stating plainly, "We want Pickens here. We think the world of him. We love him. And I think he wants to be here." That's not cautious corporate language. That's commitment. The franchise tag is one of the NFL's most powerful roster tools. It guarantees a player a 1-year salary calculated at the top end of his position while preventing him from negotiating freely with other teams. For a wide receiver of Pickens' caliber, that tag number will be substantial, but so would the open market bidding, and that's the key. Pickens just posted 1,429 receiving yards. That's not complimentary production. That's number 1 receiver output. In fact, in many markets, those numbers would define a team's top pass catcher. In Dallas, however, Pickens functions alongside CeeDee Lamb. For more than a decade, Travis Kelce has existed in a financial category that matched his football resume: elite, irreplaceable, and worth every dollar. But as he approaches what would be his 14th NFL season, the equation facing the Kansas City Chiefs is no longer about legacy. It's about projection. And projection can be uncomfortable. Travis Kelce, now 36, just completed the 2-year, $34.25 million extension he signed in 2024. That deal carried an average annual value of $17.125 million, and at the time, briefly made him the highest paid tight end in football. It was a contract that reflected both production and prestige. Kelce wasn't just a Pro Bowler, he was the engine of the Chiefs' passing game, the security blanket for Patrick Mahomes, and the face of sustained AFC dominance. But the market doesn't stand still. Since Kelce inked that extension, the tight end landscape has shifted. George Kittle and Trey McBride both secured deals that surpassed Kelce's previous annual average, resetting the top of the position. Younger, entering or in their primes, projectable production curves. Kelce, meanwhile, is confronting the reality every great player eventually faces: the difference between what you've done and what you're expected to do next. Despite being technically an unrestricted free agent, the expectation across the league is that if Kelce plays, it will be in Kansas City. The idea of him wearing another uniform feels almost unnatural. NFL insider Tom Pelissero has indicated that discussions have already begun, signaling mutual interest in extending the partnership. The question isn't whether both sides want it, it's how to price it. Kelce's 2025 production shows he remains highly effective. He posted 76 receptions for 851 yards and 5 touchdowns across 17 games. He earned his 11th consecutive Pro Bowl selection. Among tight ends, he tied for 6th in receptions and ranked 4th in receiving yards. Those aren't farewell tour numbers, they're legitimate starter numbers. But they're also not peak Kelce numbers. There was a time when Kelce threatened 1,300 yards annually, when he dictated coverage structures and forced defensive coordinators to reimagine nickel packages. At 36, he's still polished, still savvy, still dangerous in option routes, but the explosive separation isn't quite as frequent, and the volume ceiling appears lower. That nuance is what complicates negotiations. The Chiefs are coming off a 6-11 season, their first losing campaign in 13 years. The offense showed cracks beyond just Kelce's aging curve. Wide receiver inconsistency, running back depth concerns, and offensive line fluctuations all contributed. And hovering over everything is the health of Patrick Mahomes, who is returning from a late-season knee injury. Mahomes' presence amplifies Kelce's value. The chemistry between them has defined an era. Timing-based option routes require trust that can't be replicated overnight. In critical third-down situations, Mahomes instinctively looks for number 87. Removing Kelce from that ecosystem would create schematic and psychological ripple effects. Yet, the salary cap is unforgiving. Kansas City must allocate resources strategically. Paying Kelce at or near the top of the market could limit flexibility at wide receiver, a position that desperately needs reinforcements, or along the defensive front. The front office isn't evaluating Kelce in isolation. They're evaluating him relative to opportunity cost. Former NFL general manager Mike Tannenbaum articulated the harshest version of the argument: you pay for what a player will do, not what he has done. That mindset isn't emotional, it's mathematical. If Kelce commands $15 to $17 million annually again, the Chiefs would be betting that his 2026 output mirrors top-tier tight ends in their late 20s. That's a risky bet at 36, regardless of resume. There is precedent for late-career tight ends accepting adjusted compensation. Tony Gonzalez signed a 2-year, $14 million deal with the Atlanta Falcons shortly after turning 37. At $7 million per year, that contract placed him outside the very top of the market at the time. Adjusted for today's cap growth, that figure would equate to roughly $17 million annually. But context matters. Gonzalez wasn't being paid as the premier tight end anymore. He was being paid as a high-level veteran contributor. Kelce may face a similar crossroads. SpotRack projects his market value around $10.8 million on a 1-year deal. That number places him in the second tier of starting tight ends. Respected, productive, but not market resetting. For Kelce, The decision may hinge on priorities. Does he seek maximum compensation, leveraging brand and resume? Or does he prioritize finishing his career in Kansas City with roster flexibility that enhances championship odds? A hometown discount doesn't necessarily mean undervaluation. It could mean a lower base salary paired with performance incentives, per game bonuses, playoff escalators, statistical thresholds that reward availability and impact. That structure protects the team while giving Kelce a path to recoup earnings if he performs at a high level. From a strategic standpoint, such a compromise makes sense. Kansas City needs offensive continuity as Mahomes recovers. Removing Kelce would force immediate schematic adjustments. Young tight ends rarely replicate veteran route nuance. Drafting a successor might be wise long-term, but expecting instant production is unrealistic. At the same time, clinging to aging stars at premium prices is how contenders erode slowly. The Chiefs must balance reverence with realism. Kelce's leverage lies in more than numbers. He's a cultural pillar, a locker room tone setter, a postseason performer whose resume includes some of the most critical catches in franchise history. Leadership has value, though it's harder to quantify on spreadsheets. There's also branding impact. Kelce remains one of the league's most recognizable personalities. Jersey sales, national visibility, and marketing reach aren't irrelevant considerations, especially for a franchise rebuilding momentum after a losing season. But none of that overrides cap math. If Kelce were to command near his previous $17.1125 million annual average, Kansas City would likely need to restructure other contracts or sacrifice depth elsewhere. In a roster with multiple question marks, that may be untenable. The more plausible outcome is a one-year deal in the $10 to $12 million range, with incentives pushing total value higher. That structure aligns with SpotRack's projection and acknowledges both his sustained productivity and age curve. For Kelce, accepting less than market peak doesn't diminish legacy. It may, in fact, enhance it, signaling commitment to finishing where it all began and prioritizing contention over compensation. The alternative, testing open market waters, feels improbable. Few teams would pay a 36-year-old tight end premium dollars while also offering legitimate championship infrastructure. In Kansas City, he has chemistry, familiarity, and unfinished business. The 6-11 season exposed fragility within what once felt like an automatic contender. A recalibrated contract for Kelce could become part of the reset, not a sign of decline, but of strategic evolution. Ultimately, this negotiation isn't adversarial. It's philosophical. How does a franchise honor a future Hall of Famer while protecting its future? How does a veteran star reconcile competitive fire with financial reality? Somewhere between legacy pay and hometown discount lies the answer. And if both sides navigate it carefully, Kelce's 14th season won't just be about extending a career, it will be about redefining value in the final chapter of one of the greatest tight end runs the league has ever seen. When elite pass rushers hit the trade market, the entire league pays attention. And right now, few names carry more weight than Maxx Crosby. The Las Vegas Raiders edge defender has quietly become one of the NFL's most disruptive forces over the past several seasons. Even during a turbulent 2025 campaign, Crosby remained a lone bright spot, finishing with 10 sacks despite facing constant double teams and minimal complementary pressure along the defensive line. Offensive coordinators knew where the threat was coming from and often still couldn't stop it. Now, as Las Vegas stares down another organizational reset, Crosby's future has become the league's worst-kept secret. According to Vincent Bonsignor of the New York Post, multiple teams are prepared to pay a massive price to acquire the 5-time Pro Bowler. The reported asking price? 2 first-round picks. That number isn't random. It's the going rate for stars at premium positions. Edge rusher is one of the NFL's most valuable roles. Quarterbacks change games, but pass rushers end them. They alter protection schemes. They force quick throws. They create strip sacks in defining moments. And elite ones are extraordinarily difficult to find. Recent history reinforces the market's standard. Khalil Mack commanded a pair of first-rounders when he was traded in his prime. Jalen Ramsey drew a similarly massive haul at a premium defensive position. Even the mere concept of trading someone like Micah Parsons would start with a comparable framework because of positional impact. Crosby fits that tier of influence. He's relentless. His motor is arguably his defining trait. Even in games where he doesn't fill the stat sheet, he collapses pockets and forces quarterbacks off their spots. He plays with a visible edge, an emotional intensity that sets a tone for the defense. But context complicates the situation. Crosby is entering his age 29 season. For most edge rushers, that's still within prime territory, but it's the back half of it. Elite production can continue into the early 30s, but athletic peaks are finite. If a team trades 2 first-round picks, they're not just buying one season, they're investing in a multi-year championship window. That's where timing becomes everything. Las Vegas is not in that window. The Raiders are transitioning again, new head coach, new direction, and reportedly a new quarterback in Indiana's Fernando Mendoza. Rebuild timelines rarely align with 29-year-old defensive stars seeking immediate contention. And while the organization may not want to trade Crosby, reality can override preference. If your franchise cornerstone doesn't want to endure another multi-year rebuild, leverage shifts. For the Raiders, the decision becomes philosophical. Cling to your best player and hope the rebuild accelerates unexpectedly, or maximize his value at peak demand and fast-track the reset. 2 first-round picks is transformational capital. First-rounders aren't guarantees, but they are opportunity. They allow a front office to control rookie contracts at premium positions for 5 years. They create flexibility to move up in drafts. They can be packaged for quarterbacks. They represent optionality, and optionality is everything in a rebuild. Consider the math. If Las Vegas secures 2 firsts for Crosby, that's potentially 2 foundational pieces on rookie deals, plus the cap relief associated with moving a high-salary veteran. That financial flexibility can then be reinvested into younger depth, mid-tier free agents, or future extensions. Emotionally, it's difficult. Crosby isn't just productive, he embodies the franchise's toughness. Trading him would signal a full acknowledgement that contention is not imminent. But strategically, it may make sense. Teams calling about Crosby aren't fringe contenders. They're likely playoff-caliber organizations a dominant edge rusher away from defensive transformation. For them, surrendering 2 late first-round picks could be worth the gamble. A pass rusher of Crosby's caliber can swing postseason games. From Crosby's perspective, the motivation is understandable. Elite competitors rarely want to spend their prime years waiting for a rebuild to materialize. He has proven he can produce without support. Imagine his impact on a defense with interior push and secondary stability. His sack totals could spike. His efficiency could improve. His postseason resume could grow. The Raiders, meanwhile, must confront their timeline honestly. A new coach and a presumed young quarterback signal patience. Development cycles require stability and cap health. Holding on to a star who may not align with that arc risks diminishing returns, both financially and culturally. There's also leverage to consider. If multiple teams are more than willing to meet a 2 first-round asking price, Las Vegas can spark a bidding war. Conditional picks, additional day 2 selections, or player sweeteners could inflate the package. Trade markets thrive on scarcity, and elite edge rushers entering their age 29 season don't become available often. Still, risk exists on both sides. For the acquiring team, surrendering 2 first-rounders narrows future draft flexibility. Miss on the next quarterback class? That capital is gone. Suffer unexpected injuries? The margin for roster correction shrinks. For the Raiders, draft picks are theoretical assets. Crosby has proven production. Replacing a double-digit sack artist is easier on paper than on Sundays, but rebuilding franchises must prioritize alignment over sentiment. Crosby's value may never be higher. Productive. Healthy. Still within his prime window. High character, high motor, those traits command maximum return. And if Las Vegas truly commits to a youth movement, flipping a 29-year-old star for 2 first-round picks accelerates the process dramatically. Ultimately, this isn't about whether Crosby deserves to stay. It's about whether timelines match. Championship windows are fragile. Rebuilds require patience. Rarely do those 2 realities overlap cleanly. If the reported price holds at 2 first-round picks, the Raiders face a defining crossroads. Keep the face of the defense and hope contention arrives sooner than projected, or embrace the reset fully and convert elite talent into foundational capital. In today's NFL economy, that's the cost of doing business. And for a player as disruptive as Maxx Crosby, the market has spoken. Elite pass rush doesn't come cheap. When elite pass rushers hit the trade market, the entire league pays attention. And right now, few names carry more weight than Maxx Crosby. The Las Vegas Raiders edge defender has quietly become one of the NFL's most disruptive forces over the past several seasons. Even during a turbulent 2025 campaign, Crosby remained a lone bright spot, finishing with 10 sacks despite facing constant double teams and minimal complementary pressure along the defensive line. Offensive coordinators knew where the threat was coming from and often still couldn't stop it. Now, as Las Vegas stares down another organizational reset, Crosby's future has become the league's worst-kept secret. According to Vincent Bonsignor of the New York Post, multiple teams are prepared to pay a massive price to acquire the five-time Pro Bowler. The reported asking price? 2 first-round picks. That number isn't random. It's the going rate for stars at premium positions. Edge rusher is one of the NFL's most valuable roles. Quarterbacks change games, but pass rushers end them. They alter protection schemes. They force quick throws. They create strip sacks in defining moments. And elite ones are extraordinarily difficult to find. Recent history reinforces the market's standard.